Oh, I knew it. I absolutely knew it. I never took a take on the whole milkshaking thing because I wanted to do a quick one whenever some idiot decided that defending the tactic because it's against targets they don't like is a good idea. And it's only my favourite literal communist, Ash Sarkar.
Milkshake, hot wings.
Oh my god, I hate it already.
Breaking news, a wave of milkshakings has taken place across the UK.
Yes, I find the attacks on the political discourse that is supposed to be civil very bloody worrying. These things only escalate, and if nothing actually happens with them, they only get worse and worse and worse because they think they can get away with worse and worse and worse. These things happen in inches, Ash.
At the time of recording, Tommy Robinson has been milkshaked twice, Nigel Farage got milkshook, and Carl of Swindon got absolutely covered in this stuff.
Okay, Ash, can you tell me how you'd feel if these targets were Owen Jones, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell? Three communists that you get along with very, very well. Can you please tell me whether this would still have the same tone that you have now, or would you be playing the dramatic music over instead of this fun-loving do stuff?
As far as I know, the flavours have been strawberry and also banana and salted caramel. Ooh, fancy.
Oh my god, I really, really hate her smug tone. You are being so fucking smug when something that is going to inch towards more violent attacks is happening. I like how you're only going on about the milkshaking of Tommy Robinson. Are you missing out the fact that bricks have been thrown at him on purpose, or are you just stupid and ignorant?
Now, a lot of the people who have spoken out against this tidal wave of milkshakings have said that it's not in defence of the individuals in question, that Tommy Robinson, Carl Benjamin, and indeed Nigel Farage are all absolutely reprehensible.
If the dirty, dirty smear merchants are to be believed, then yes, I would agree, they would seem reprehensible. But unfortunately, they're also part of the problem. They are part of the reason this is happening. It's funny that you're being so one-sided about this, Ash.
What they argue is that we can't lower ourselves to their level by giving up on polite and rational debate altogether.
I agree, it's one of the things that keeps society from going into anarchy, tyranny, and all sorts of forms of violence. It's how we have legitimate power. It has undertones of force, which is why we have the army and the police force, but the state has a monopoly on that for a very good reason, because otherwise you get vigilantism and people get lynched.
And turning to dairy. Now, you might already know what I think about debates. I think they're kind of dumb.
It's probably because emotional arguments don't play very well into them. You have to be incredibly objective to convince people, otherwise there's absolutely no point in going into one. I understand that you have trouble being objective, Ash. I understand that most of your points of view are from views of feelings of equality and feelings that things aren't right, and you have absolutely no objective lens on the world. I can understand why you would be against debate in that case, and so I understand why you have trouble being civil about everything, because you cannot deal with reality.
But I do think we need to more seriously engage with this idea that getting milkshake in your mush or on your gums constitutes some kind of fundamental threat to democratic values.
What do you mean it doesn't? Go on, what do you mean it doesn't? This better be good. Oh, I swear to God, if this isn't good, I'm going to scream.
Now, is having milkshake lobbed at politicians an ideal condition of politics? Sorry to be a centrist, but I think I'm going to have to say no.
This isn't a political position. It's not a left, right or centrist position to say violence in political discourse is bad. It's just not an extreme position. It is a point of principle. It is the principle of freedom of speech. At least you're halfway there by saying you understand it's not ideal, but saying it's centrism is beyond the bloody pale. I mean, at least you're not doing the meme where it's like, doing half the political violence you're advocating for is right. At least you're not that type of straw man of a centrist. But for God's sake, you're not a centrist if you don't believe in political violence. You are a normal, civilised person.
But then again, neither is having an MEP candidate repeatedly make rape jokes about a female Labour MP with utter impunity.
2. He made 2. And they were jokes, meaning that they weren't supposed to be taken literally. I understand you're humourless when it comes to this sort of thing, Ash. You know, possibly understandably. However, if you think it's okay to throw a milkshake at someone because of a joke they don't have to look at or listen to, I think again you are a tyrant and don't believe in freedom of speech, but we already knew that.
or for that matter, the candidacy of Tommy Robinson, also known as Stephen Yaxley Lennon.
Oh, how will he ever recover now that you've said his original name? Oh my God, he's owned, lads. He's never getting that seat now. He is absolutely. How can he recover?
A man with a proven history of violence, of racism.
Taxi. Little that drives car.
Yes, Tommy Robinson is a working class chappie. If he is ever unjustly violent, do you know who deals with it? Oh, I said it before, the police. They have a monopoly on force, so that he can re-enter society and be as civil as he can. And if you're uncivil to him, that is entirely unjustified, because as far as society and the law is concerned, he is back to being a citizen with full rights.
The most controversial milkshaking to date has been that of Nigel Farage, probably because he's already an elected MEP, but also because his safest seat has proved to be on BBC panel shows.
What? Says you, Ash? What the hell? I have been looking at who has been on panel shows for the past, month. Ash has been on the BBC. I must have seen her on the BBC about 10 times just in the past month. Are you kidding me? You're telling me Nigel Farage's safest seat is on BBC? At least he has a seat. At least he's an active politician. Are you seriously going to make that joke? When you look at yourself, look at this type of discourse you're adding in to the political discourse, and then trying to defend a joke like that. Seriously. That's actually really annoyed me. The fact that you would say someone else has a safer seat on BBC when you're on the panel shows adding absolutely nothing to the discussion every time you're there. I can't believe you've just said that. You seriously need a look in the mirror, love.
Tommy Robinson, Carl Benjamin and Nigel Farage differ in their levels of mainstream respectability, but all three of them share this one tactic in common. We've all seen the videos of Tommy throwing punches or Carl Benjamin saying he'd rape someone if pressured.
Honestly, from what I've seen, I don't think anyone who is actually against Carl has actually ever seen a video of him. I think they just look at the smear merchants' copy and paste job of it and what they've cut all together and then just go off that as if the smear merchants are to be trusted. Idiots, man.
But it's worth pointing out that Nigel Farage also uses a lot of violent rhetoric in his public appearances.
Then I will be forced to don khaki, pick up a rifle and head for the front line.
Yes, he's using a World War I metaphor to talk about the European Union, because it's always compared to another superstate that was trying to exist in Europe beforehand. Do you seriously think that he was seriously suggesting that we start World War II? Or do you think that he's just trying to inspire hope that we're going to have this election and the vote to leave enforced or implemented? You have a seriously hard time understanding nuance and the tone in which these people speak. It's almost like you're trying to make the least charitable interpretation of what they're saying to make a point, because without being uncharitable, you can't make a point.
And just 8 days after Labour MP Joe Cox was shot and stabbed to death by a right-wing nationalist, Nigel Farage boasted that the Brexit campaign had been won without a single bullet being fired.
Oh, another stupid point I have to deal with. Yes, Joe Cox was murdered by a right-wing lunatic. He was entirely a lone wolf, and if you looked in the media, everyone was against this. Nigel Farage was against this, Carl of Swindon was against this, Tommy Robinson was against this. Every single one of them was against actually murdering people and actually having political violence, because they have principles and understand that that is not how we do politics. And because of this, that means the lunatic doesn't represent anything to do with these people or anything to do with Brexit. And that is why Farage said a single bullet was not fired. We got out of a massive European state that we never thought we could get out of. I mean, I know we're technically not out of it yet, but this was the day of the election. You've got to understand, we had massive hopes in those days. But when he says not a single bullet was fired, he means we didn't go into a war over it. He understands that people die and that Joe Cox was murdered. But again, that guy doesn't represent anything to do with Brexit or the current political discourse. You just keep using it because she is now a martyr. And I honestly think that's a horrible way to remember her name. She was a lovely MP and a lovely woman. And I absolutely hate her name being used to defend more political intimidation. If you seriously think that's what she would have wanted, then you are completely wrong.
So when I've brought this up in the mainstream media, I've just been dismissed by people saying that Nigel Farage is simply an eccentric or he's a blusterer using metaphors.
Yes, the proof is whenever political violence is used, or any type of violence is used, he is against it in principle. And he always uses metaphors and he always uses hyperbole. It's a common tactic in his politics. And if you want to just ignore that to be uncharitable, that makes you a tyrant.
I disagree. I think something much deeper is going on here. And it's this thing called stochastic terrorism. What stochastic terrorism refers to are public speech acts by prominent figures which are deliberately designed to inflame tensions.
Oh my god, you found a better word to use than dog whistling. Jesus Christ.
So it might be dehumanizing language against racial or minority groups. It might be desensitizing us to the idea of sexual violence, or it might be rhetoric which normalizes the idea of a coming civil war. And what this all does is make the likelihood of violence by so-called lone wolf actors more probable without directly inciting it.
And so your response to that, your actual response to that is to then actually physically and openly justify political intimidation. You have this whole mindset that people are dog whistling for violence, and your response to that is to actually say, oh yeah, let's be violent back in advance. Politically violent actors are usually rather open about why they did exactly what they did. That's why every single terrorist has written a manifesto or followed a manifesto. It's so you know exactly what they're thinking. And as far as I'm aware, people who have been in these manifestos haven't openly said, we need violence. And instead, what the person has said is, I don't think these people are going far enough. And I'm pretty sure you have examples of this, or you're going to bring them up.
The radicalisation of violent right-wing extremists doesn't just happen in the dark corners of 4chan. It happens in the broad daylight of mainstream discourse.
Yes, and people have a much easier time at pointing at people like you, who are actively encouraging this and condoning this right now, than they do with people like Nigel Farage. Because you're being uncharitable, and these people can see that you are being uncharitable about it.
Anders Breivik quoted Daily Mail columnist Melanie Phillips at length in his manifesto. Darren Osborne, the Finsbury Park mosque attacker, was radicalised by Tommy Robinson. And the Quebec mosque shooter Alexandre Bissonnette was obsessed with conservative bloviators like Paul Joseph Watson and Ben Shapiro.
Yes, you idiot. What these people put in their manifestos and in their blogs online or whatever, what they did was openly say, these people are giving me information, I'm interpreting this information this way, I don't feel that enough is being done with this information because clearly there's a problem. And then they get radicalised from that. I mean, for God's sake, Elliot Rodgers watched TYT. You never see anyone saying that TYT radicalises people. I mean, for God's sake, if, by your logic, terrorists citing journalists and activists who haven't openly called for violence means that they need to be shut down, that means we need to shut down TYT. And you're openly advocating this right now. You are openly advocating political intimidation, and nothing happens to you. I cannot believe it. I cannot actually believe it.
And at some point, you've got to recognise that there is a pattern here. They might be operating in logistical isolation, so no one is actually helping them plan these attacks. But ideologically, they are very plugged into these networks that exist within mainstream institutions.
Paul Joseph Watson, Ben Shapiro, and Tommy Robinson are mainstream institutions. Are you taking the piss, Ash? Are you actually joking? You would call them mainstream? What the hell? Unbelievably, yes, they follow the same people who point out the same problems. But these people pointing out the problems aren't saying be violent about it. They are trying to keep the discourse as civil as possible without resorting to violence. You are doing the opposite and saying that the free market of ideas doesn't work because you keep losing because your ideas are stupid, and so you have to turn to political intimidation like this.
When you've got figures like Tommy Robinson causing havoc up and down the country.
Ash, him and his supporters got bricks thrown at them? Are you sure it's him causing this?
When you've got Carl Benjamin still contesting an election.
He has not broken any electoral rules. Yes, he is perfectly free to contest an election.
And when Nigel Farage is topping the polls with the Brexit Party, what can people do?
debate them, come up with better ideas, give a good argument for why we should stay in the EU. A lot of things they can do in the free marketplace of ideas. But unfortunately, you're going to say this.
I don't think it's surprising that people have turned to milkshakes as a means to express their anger and disdain for this form of politics, and also a form of solidarity with victims of racism.
I know it's really unfortunate for you, but you do actually have to tolerate intolerant people like that, as long as they do not break the law, as long as they just hold it as an opinion, and if they only speak openly about it, and they don't even have to speak openly about it, they can keep it to themselves, you have to live with that. And then if they discriminate against you or do anything that's unjust, believe it or not, the police will come along, arrest them, and put them into court. And then the court deals with them. You don't need this vigilanteism, because all it does is escalate. It means that the monopoly of force is not with the police, and it means that we go into anarchy. And you will try and be totalitarian, and believe me when I say this, someone worse will come along. It happens every time in history, Ash. You do not want this.
After his policing in Newcastle, Nigel Farage was too spooked to get off the campaign bus in Wakefield.
Yes, because if it was that easy to throw a harmless projectile at him, think about how easy it is to throw a harmful and a projectile that would do damage to him is. That's why he won't get off the bus. You have scared him, yes, you have intimidated him. You have made it so he cannot speak freely. That is antithetical to everything we stand for in this country. It is a principle we all must get behind. If you cannot let the dissenters speak freely, then we have lost under our own tyranny.
So really, this form of civil disobedience, which doesn't cause any injury.
I suppose you're lucky that none of these people are lactose intolerant, because if they were, they possibly will have to go to hospital. But either way, whether it causes injury or not is completely irrelevant. It is still assault. You have intentionally thrown a projectile, whether it be liquid or solid, at another person. You have done this unlawfully and unjustly in an attempt to intimidate. This is absolutely against everything we stand for in this country. The people who do this deserve to get arrested and deserve some sort of punishment. Admittedly, it should just be fines at this point. I don't think it's that bad. But honestly, if they get away with what they do, they will do it more. And I think the police know that. And I think the police would rather not have to deal with bricks being thrown at politicians. But alas, you come here for 5 minutes and try to defend it, because every time you show up on TV, you are absolutely schooled by other people on the panel, and you still think that anecdotes are evidence. You absolute buffoon.
Has proved more effective at reshaping the media narrative than debating him in the marketplace of ideas.
Yes, it's almost like your ideas are idiotic. It's almost like Remainers' ideas are idiotic to most of the population. Unbelievably, how people vote and how people react to politicians is entirely based on their own subjective opinions and biases. Not everyone's the same, Ash. The marketplace is under scrutiny from the general public constantly. And right now, because Nigel Farage is winning, and he is bloody winning, there is nothing you can do apart from try and act unjustly. And in the marketplace of ideas, that means you have lost by default. Imagine having ideas so bad you have to resort to this. I'm afraid, Ash, you lost, and for some reason you are acting like a smug twat.
If you like this video,
No, Ash, I did not like the video, and no, I'm not going to let you shill. I mean, for God's sake, I don't even shill on my own channel. I'm not letting you shill on mine. But anyway, that was everything Ash had to say. She actually had some points there, and unfortunately, they were all completely wrong. So fortunately, I was here to point out her flaws in her logic. But unfortunately, that's everything I had for you today. So, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.